Hi. So I did say I was going to make another video, and here it is. And again, it's about sort of media and propaganda. And I want to inform you of something. You need to really start watching Russia Today, because what I'm going to show you now isn't played on any of our media stations. Not the BBC, not ITV, not ABC, not MSNBC, in America, not Sky News, not anywhere. They do not play this kind of thing, alright? Russia Today is the only mainstream media that actually shows the world for the way it really is. And they talk about, people that are corrupt, that are in government, okay? This is where you want to get your info from, not the BBC. That is controlled media, okay? It's owned by the Zionists. They tell you what they want you to believe. They tell you a story that they want you to buy into, so that then we end up going to war. Anyway, you can look up this episode of the Kaiser Report. It's New Year's Eve's version one, and if you want to watch it more in depth. But I just want to show you a few clips from it to get across a few points, really. Okay, so here we go.
On the Kaiser Report, you said years ago, you told us it would start the currency wars would lead to trade wars. We have the trade wars going on now. Of course, we have sanctions all over the world. And then you said the trade wars would lead to world war. It does feel like we're heading toward world war. It kind of eased up a little bit at the end of the year with Kerry backing down in terms of Syria. But is 2016 the year we start to actually see world war, or is that for another year?
It may well be if no one's talking peace. For example, 2 weeks ago, they had a debate here in the States on the presidential reality show on the Republican end, and it was on foreign policy. All they talked about is which guy's going to get tougher than the other guy. Oh, and the women too. Carly Fiorina. I'm not going to talk to that Putin, and I'm going to build the Sixth Fleet bigger right in front of his eyes, and I'm going to build a missile defense system right at Russia. I'm saying to myself, not only is she going to be busy doing all this building fleets, building missiles, all they're doing is talking war. Every one of these little guys that couldn't fight their way out of a paper bag is talking about, you know what? Let's see if that sand will glow after we bomb it. Every one of them is talking more war. More boots on the ground. We got to get our allies and fight this ISIS no matter where it is. And every one of them is talking about an escalation. No one is talking about peace.
Gerald, looking back over the previous century, America was in a depression in the 30s, and the common wisdom is that the only way America could get out of that depression was World War II. And I'm looking around the world today, and so many economies are in recession or in depression, and so many industries are collapsing, and you have pockets of extreme poverty throughout America, throughout the world. Is part of the problem this idea that only war can get an economy out of a depression or a recession? In other words, we don't have an example of a recession or a depression being escaped from through peace that anyone can remember. So is that part of the problem? We have a problem of inculcation. People just don't understand that you can have an economy based on peaceful activities.
Yeah, that's part of the problem. And again, you made it perfect. It's the crash of 1929, the Great Depression, currency wars, trade wars, World War, the Panic of '08, the Great Recession, and now we're going into a global recession, currency wars as the Fed is raising interest rates, and now these emerging markets have to pay back all of that cheap money that they got. Now with devalued currencies, they have to pay it back in dollars, which they can't. The commodity prices are sinking, so they're losing money when they're selling their stuff. So now they're talking trade wars, thinking that because their currencies are going to go down, they're going to be exporting more, but they're not, because people don't have money to buy it. And then World War. When all else fails, take you to war. That's not one of my empty slogans. It's a fact. Hey, you don't have to look too far. Look out your window and across the channel over there, what happened over there in France when they had that last terror strike. All of a sudden, this little guy, Hollande, his popularity goes up 17% after the attack. We're going to get tough. And then you look at all the people joining the military. Look what happened over here in the States after San Bernardino. Oh, you know what the top topic is now? It's not the lousy economy. It's not the fact that people can't find jobs. It's not the fact that all these people that graduated college with these hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of debt and they can't find a job. That's not the issue. The number one issue here in the United States is terror.
Okay, so Stacey just said to Gerald there, basically, instead of going to war, Donald Trump has put forward this thing, instead of, going to war and taking people's, lands and countries for their oil and spending the $4 trillion that they have in doing that, why not spend that on infrastructure? Let's listen to what Gerald Celente has to say about that.
Is that something that might get through?
Yes, but no one's really talking about it. You just mentioned it. It was one phrase in the whole thing, and then he goes on to the other thing that we got to bomb them. It'd be ISIS. So, and by the way, according to Stiglitz, the Harvard professor that did the study, it's almost $7 trillion now spent in Iraq and Afghanistan. And by the way, no one is talking about why they hate us and why radicalism is formed. For example, the United States and its coalition of the killing have murdered over 1 million Iraqis during this overthrow of Saddam Hussein based on lies. He didn't have weapons of mass destruction, it ties to Al-Qaeda, and no one's talking about that because there were people that knew the facts that he didn't have them, like Scott Ritter, who got blackballed, and others. Number two, the longest war in American history, the Afghan War, totally out of control. So now let's put our minds together for a split second and think, okay, you destroyed my country, I can't get a job, everybody I love is dead, I have no future, I'm a Libyan, I'm a Syrian, I'm an Iraqi, I'm an Afghan, and I forgot Yemen. How could I forget Yemen? Because it's never in the news. The beheaders-in-chief over there, the Saudis, along with the United States and its coalition, are slaughtering the poorest people in the Middle East, and they've done nothing. So now, you're a young guy, you have no future in front of you, everything has been destroyed, the people you love have been murdered by foreigners, you think you want to seek revenge? It's never discussed.
You brought
Okay, so that was quite interesting, huh? Yeah, always talking about ISIS. ISIS this, ISIS that. ISIS is controlled by Israel. You can Google that. It's not exactly hidden very well. Not only that, Putin called out Turkey to be, supplying ISIS with, oil and arms and weapons and vehicles and all sorts of stuff, essentially. And the Turkish Prime Minister is a member of the UN, and we should have been going to war with Russia. Thank God that didn't happen, because I've got to be honest, Russia isn't somebody I think we should be picking a fight with. But there you are. Now let's go on to the next part that I want to show you, and that is about the banks. So they're going to quickly talk about how many of Goldman Sachs' ex-employees, CEOs, are seemingly now running countries. So let's get into bankism and get that little subject underway as well. Okay, so here we go.
Welcome back to the Kaiser Report. Happy New Year! Yeah! Woohoo! Well, anyway, let's continue now with Gerald Celente of Trends Journal. Gerald is one of the foremost prognosticators on planet Earth. And this Trends Journal is a must-read. If you're not reading it, you don't know anything about the future. But fortunately, we're going to talk to Gerald about the future and his predictions for the future. And I'm here with Stacey Herbert, of course. We're going to... Gerald, welcome back.
Oh, thanks for having me back, and Happy New Year's.
All righty. So, Gerald, let's talk about... we finished off before the break talking about bankism and commodity prices. So let's pick it up right there.
Tell us, what is bankism? What is it, and what you have it in your last Trends Journal of 2015. You talk about this and the important topic of it. What is it? Explain it to the audience.
Once upon a time, there used to be a thing called capitalism. It's gone. It's bankism. The banks are in charge of the whole system. Markets don't rise and fall on their own merits. There's no real price discovery. It's all rigged. And that's not a conspiracy theory. Hey, over there in Europe, I got a deal for you. I got these 10-year bonds. We'll call them negative yields. Yeah, you give me money, you loan me money, I'll give you back less than you loaned me. You can't make this up. Negative interest rates going on what? For almost 10 years. Zero interest rates, going on for almost 10 years. The banks are rigging the entire system. They're in control of the world. Capitalism is dead. 4 words, by the way, killed it. For anybody that has a brain between their ears, they could count that high. Too big to fail. In capitalism, there's no such thing. The banks are running the entire world, whether it's the Chinese banks with all their fake dough pumping into the system, whether it's the ECB, whether it's the Fed. Oh, and the other one. They keep making up this story. You know, we have to hit that 2% inflation rate.
You've heard the politicians talk about that.
That 2% inflation, when they were forming the Euro group, the currency market, that was set back in the early 90s when inflation was running in Europe at 5%. And the 2% was, you can't exceed 2%. Now they're making up this big lie that we got to keep buying bonds, we got to keep all this money flowing in, because inflation's too low.
All right, let's talk about this for a second, because you mentioned that capitalism is dead. We now have an era of bankism. Let's talk about something that is germane to capitalism, which we've lost. And that is something called price discovery. So traditionally in a capitalist system, you got buyers and sellers, and based on their actions, there's a price set in the market. Now the problem is, and this is what I think you're talking about with bankism, is that suddenly you've got a class of elites, bankers and kleptocrats who have come in and said, you know what, let's change the rules a little bit. And I'll give you the example of it. We're going to say that a foot is no longer 12 inches, but it's 13 inches. And they start to build according to this new standard of a 13-inch foot. And after a couple of years, suddenly everything gets wobbly, everything gets shaky, because they've redefined the entire measurement system according to their objective on top of a system that was not built according to those weights and measures. And now we're at a point where everything is toppling over because they simply decided to redefine what price discovery means. And as a result now, there is no price discovery. It's just a figment of some banker's imagination based on something on a balance sheet that only exists under certain conditions as advised to them by an outside consultant who's completely corrupt.
Amen, brother. You said it. They're making this up. Why are the banks in charge of running the world? You got that guy Draghi over there, you know, the former Goldman Sachs head of the European division. I'll do anything it takes to keep this going. Look at the other guy over there in your country over there, Carney. Carney, you know what the word Carney is? That's a slang for carnival man.
Mark
Carney. Carney. Yeah, he was at Goldman Sachs too, wasn't he? Oh, wait a minute. Wasn't the guy that made up Too Big to Fail? I think he's playing Frankenstein movies now. Henry Paulson, yeah, under Bush. Oh, I think he was the CEO of Goldman Sachs too. Hey, wait a minute. The guy that killed the Glass-Steagall Act, Robert Rubin. Yeah, Goldman Sachs, son of a gun. Oh, wait a minute. The new guy they got over there in running the fraud over there in Australia. Yeah, Turnbull. Oh, yeah, him. Goldman Sachs. Can anybody add it up? The banks are running the world. You're a slave to the banksters. Hey, we just had Christmas time. Remember?
So yeah, I paused it a little bit early there. There's a bit that I wanted you to actually see. So I've sort of retaken it. You're going to hear "You're a slave" again. Sorry about that. But it's not with really regards to the Jesus-y bit, because that's not my thing. But essentially it is about that these people have been around since before he was around. Yeah, because listen to what Gerald just says.
The banks are running the world. You're a slave to the banksters. Hey, we just had Christmas time. Remember the guy? Nobody talks about him anymore. Jesus Christ. Yeah, that was his name. I think they called him the Prince of Peace. One time he became violent. He picked up a whip to drive the money changers out of the temple. Nothing's changed.
Will something change? Because you say we've had this bankism, we have seen this since the crash of 2007, 2008. At the end of the year, coming into the end of 2015, going into 2016, we saw manufacturing down in America. The reports came out, 0.6%. Manufacturing is collapsing. The Bank of International Settlements, who is the bankist of them all, well, they said at the end of the year as well, of this year, that, in fact, that central banks have created so much moral hazard in the banking system that there's so much debt and all of it's going to collapse. Will 2016 be the year it collapses? And if it collapses so soon again, and so many, and we're at near zero, and we're at, the Fed's balance sheet is so huge, and there are no jobs, is this possibly the year that finally Americans decide, hey, we're tired of this? Is it possible?
You know, I thought it would have collapsed a long time ago, and they keep making up new stuff, like negative interest rates. As for the American people, they lost the fight. There's no fight here anymore.
They're kicking the can down the
People lost
road.
their courage. They're going to vote again for a lesser of two evils. So there's nothing there right now. It's flat. So there's really, the people have given up. You know, there's a great quote by Andrew Jackson. One man of courage makes a majority. And there are very few people of courage anymore. Everybody's afraid to step out and speak up. And
Well, let's talk about courage. Yeah, let's talk about courage for a second.
So there you go. That's where I'm going to finish. Some really interesting things being said there. Banks are running the world, mainly ex-Goldman Sachs members. You know, how have they got away with running a world? Well, because they were branded as too big to fail. The point of this video is the other information, the information that you need to know what's really going on, is out there. Alright, so switch Russia Today on, switch the BBC and anything else that you watch or get your information from off, apart from maybe conspiracy channels on you know, YouTube, you know. And be mindful that the government are trying to censor the internet, and that basically means they wish to censor YouTube, and they'll do it under their terrorism, their alleged terrorism. They'll just say, you know, you're inciting racial hatred, or you're, you know, whatever, you're working against the system. Alright, that's how they're starting to operate now. They're becoming a lot more tyrannical in their approach. You can see that with the Paris attacks. You know, they took away people's right to gather in groups, and people had to leave their trainers there to show their solidarity. Oh yeah, well, what happened to the old argument of we won't let the terrorists take our freedom? Well, that's exactly what the government's doing, taking your freedom. You need to get yourself onto the internet and Google. Yeah, you can Google it, even though it's controlled. The Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. It's a really, really fascinating read. There are people on there that rubbish it as satire and say that, oh, you know, it's just some hoax, it's a big joke. It's even down on Wikipedia as propaganda. But actually, when you look at it, it is a very well written and described plan in order for Jewish world super government and for takeover of the Goyim, which is you and me. And they talk about the Masonic connections and how they've used the Masons in order to carry out secret meetings and stuff like that. You know, I talked about Bilderberg Group and Bohemian Grove and other things that go on in other videos. But, you know, you need to wake up to this stuff because, well, we're running out of time. Yeah, with every false flag attack like that of the one in Paris, unfortunately, I have to say, was definitely false flag. It happened on Friday the 13th, 13 being a very important number, and the attack started at 9 o'clock sharp. 9 obviously being another very important numerological number for them. You need to learn about numerology, learn about Zionists, and learn about the New World Order. Okay, that's where I'm going to call it. Thanks for watching. If I've been informative, spread the video like wildfire, okay? And switch on Russia Today. God bless. Namaste.